it's not, what you learn is it's not up for you to judge them, right? They'll be judged by a higher power. That's the first thing. Unfortunately, I'm an Irish American, so I cannot infiltrate the mob. We need them to build cases. And what always people think too is they think, okay, you go into the witness security program and that they don't go to jail. They go to jail. There's witness security facilities throughout the states. I can't say where they are, but they go to jail. Anthony Kappo went to jail for 4 years. Now, what happens is, and we haven't even got into when he was arrested and how this all played out, but when he was arrested on two crimes, a conspiracy to kill Charlie Majuri and on a mail fraud charge, which was basically a stock fraud. So that's what he was charged with when he pled guilty, right? And what I think one of the big things about the book is, which I haven't have seen done before, and was really important for me to tell that, is kind of to explain things to the public, how a proffer works, how cooperation works, how the WITSEC program works, how crimes work, such as loan sharking. Explain that to the public because you hear these words, but it's never really been explained. So I thought it was important to do that. But when he pled guilty, for his cooperation agreement, he has to tell us all his crimes. And off the top of my head, from what I remember, is he pled guilty to two murders, 11 murder conspiracies, and probably every crime you can think of. So it goes from him charged with two crimes to him telling us all the crimes that he did, and then him pleading guilty to all those crimes. Because what you don't want is a defense attorney to come forward and say, oh, he didn't tell you about X, because then he just lost all credibility. So again, it's not up to us to judge him, but the beauty of the mob is they always do crimes together and they do crimes with various people. So it's not like it's just one person that's going to murder somebody. They do it with others. So that's the beauty of charging people. So, as I said, I get assigned to arrest him. So what you have to do is you do a lot of checks, find out where he lives, who's in the house. If someone is living downstairs, you want to run checks to make sure that that person is not wanted by the police, right? Because you don't want to have an incident. And you have to have an arrest team. There's a lot of planning that goes into that. I wanted to, as I said, I watched George Hanna run Ralph Guarino and to see how he treated people. Now, Anthony Kappo had a reputation of being hated by law enforcement and even hated by certain people within the mob. But I wasn't going to let that affect me. I was going to treat him with respect because my goal was to get him to cooperate. So I studied him like you would study for a test. I wanted to know everything about him, and I wanted him to think that I knew everything about him. So, as I mentioned there before, he was charged with two crimes. So, when I arrested him, I wanted like mind chess to begin, right? I'm going to treat him with respect, but use mind chess against him. So, when we went to go arrest him, he wasn't at his house. So, when I ran, not so all the planning that you did went right out the window. And then his wife tells us that he's at his mom's house. So, we have to go over to his mom's house. And when I went to arrest him, I saw, a unique bond that he had with his family. So everything that I was told about him, I saw something, different from what I was actually told. I saw a unique relationship with his family. I got him dressed, with the team that I had, got him in the car. He was wearing a Dallas Cowboy jacket. I'm a Steeler fan. So right away, I'm going to start to bust his chops about that. And he was a diabetic. So I made sure that I had chocolate, orange juice for him in case his blood sugar got low. He was very thankful for that. Then I read him his rights, and he invoked his right to counsel. And then I let the mind chess begin, where I would feed him nuggets, where I would say, "What's your date of birth?" Before he could answer, I would give him his date of birth. His social security, the same thing, his kids' names, ages, dates of birth. So just playing with him a little bit so that I wanted him to know that I knew everything about him. Then I would start to say, he invoked his right to counsel. So I'd say to him, do not say a word. And then I would play with him a little bit and say, okay, you were going to murder Charlie Majuri. And I'd say, don't say a word, but your plan was to ring his doorbell and shoot him. Not do a ring and run, but to shoot him, right? And you got to think, if you're him, he's thinking, how do I know that? Because he doesn't know who the cooperator is right now. He doesn't know the evidence. He's just been arrested. So I wanted him to think about that. The same thing with regarding the stock fraud, right? Where what he did is he rented a mailbox, and back then you could rent a mailbox and it would say suite, so it would lead you to believe that you had like a nice office building or something. So I did that to him, just give him food for thought, and then I would speak to the driver, say, "Hey Brian, how are things going?" Just let him think about things, and then we spent the whole day together. And I just treated him with respect. And he hadn't been arrested in a while. So I kind of explained the Fed process to him related to pretrial, how that works. And, I explained that in the book too. So people kind of know how things go. And then we spent the day together. I was respectful to his stepfather who showed up to give him money. I made sure he got his the insulin that he had to need that day. And then lo and behold, about a week later, I got a phone call from his lawyer, and I nearly fell off the chair. And his lawyer said he wanted to speak to the government. And that's how everything started. So there are facilities throughout the states. And as you just said there, um, you do go to jail. So they're basically connections to other jails. But the beauty of it is you don't have to prove yourself. So you're in a jail with other people that are doing the same thing. Now, one thing that comes up at trial a lot of times is, oh, these guys colluded together to get their story straight. That never happens. And you prove that by saying that, Anthony Kappo and Vincent Palermo were never in the same facility together. So once they were arrested, they never saw each other again. Once they decided to cooperate, they never saw each other again. So the Marsh and also the WITSEC program is run by the U.S. Marshal Service. So they do a great job of making sure they never cross paths. They're never in the same facility at all. So to counter a defense attorney saying that they got their story straight. And in this particular case, the defense saying they came out later and they said, oh, you guys all got together and decided to cooperate before you got arrested. That is so not true, because what you see if you read the transcripts, and we talk about this later, is Vincent Palermo wanted to kill everybody before the arrest because he thought everyone was cooperating with the government. So can you imagine Vinny's thinking he wants to kill everyone, and then you decide, hey, I got this great idea. Why don't we all cooperate? He would have killed you right then and there. So that would never have happened. So, but that's what they do. The facilities, you're sick, you're not together, and it's just they're in the same boat, so you don't have to prove yourself. There's not a lot of fights because you're just trying to do your time and get out. But it's, as you said there about Sammy, there is a lot of time debriefing. I spent so many hours with Anthony going over his criminal history because he had such a voluminous history. And, I would be always taking notes, but some of the things he would say, my left eye would look up and be like, my God, I can't believe I'm trying to write this down, like some of the things that he did. I'm a new agent. I've only been there a year. And I just think I'm just doing my job. I didn't even know this, but then I quickly find out that no one in that family had ever cooperated before. So he's the first made member in their 100-year history that has cooperated with the government. So I start to hear whispers that I'm too new to run him, that maybe this kid doesn't have the experience to do it. Thankfully, my supervisor, Jack Steuben, believed in me and said, no, he's going to do it. And I was just determined to do it. It was a lot of work because I'm learning organized crime, right? And to tell you the truth, I learned a lot of organized crime through Anthony Kappo. He taught me organized crime. Was there a lot of pressure? Yes. So then kind of what happens is we have our first made member, right? And I remember we sit down and we have a proffer, and that's when a witness, a potential witness comes in and he's got to tell you all his crimes really quickly. This is a very dicey situation because you're taking him out of jail, and in a very short period of time, you got to kind of analyze, is he telling you the truth? So the first thing you want to do is, it's called eating the indictment. You want to make sure that the crimes, those two crimes that you charged him with, that you got that right and that he's going to admit his guilt to those crimes in case it goes south. So he comes in, I'm doing a proffer with George Hanna, a legendary agent, the guy that I told you about that ran Ralph Guarino, and Kenny McCabe, a legendary Southern District investigator. So Anthony comes in, he tells us, and I kind of glossed over this before, but there was a leak in the Southern District. The reason that he wasn't at his house is because they knew we were coming. So when he comes into the proffer, he tells us three things. He tells us we have a leak in the Southern District. There was a court reporter that was providing information. He tells us about the murder of Fred Weiss, which is the most indictable mob murder ever. Fred Weiss was killed on 9/11, horrible day of 1989, and I'll tell you why he was killed. And also the murder of John D'Amato, the gentleman we mentioned there before that Anthony Kappo killed himself. He shot him in the face. And the murder, a little bit about the murder of Joseph Garofano. So I'll start with Fred Weiss. Fred Weiss was killed in 1989 because John Gotti thought Fred Weiss was cooperating. He thought he was cooperating because he switched lawyers. Talk about paranoia. That's the only reason. So John Gotti was close with John D'Amato, the guy that I mentioned that Anthony Kappo killed, and it became a race between those two families to kill him. So they actually had surveillance of both families driving by each other trying to get a pattern on Fred Weiss to see his pattern of going back and forth to work. So it ended up the DeCavalcantes killed him. Anthony Kappo was the driver. Vincent Palermo was a shooter, and James Gallo, the guy that paralyzed Joseph Canigliaro, was a shooter as well. So the DeCavalcantes killed Joseph Canigliaro. Again, we were talking a little bit ago about Sammy the Bull, and I'm reading books, and now I'm one step away from hearing all this stuff. So it was an amazing thing for me as a new agent to hear.